All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we are going to update you on what Stephen ESPINOZA of Showtime Sports had to say around rumors related to the Errol Spence Jr. Terence Crawford fight, and also some great clarification and information provided indirectly about the fight itself and what some of the things that Bob Arum had to say, and pretty much confirming what Bob Arum had to say about issues related to the Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford fight. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we are going to talk about the Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford fight, but specifically what Stephen ESPINOZA, who is the president of Showtime Sports, had to say in a recent interview conducted by Tay Jones over on Tay Jones' YouTube channel, where he clarified what he was talking about as far as comical rumors, gave a little bit more detail into that, but he also gave a lot of detail relating to the difficulties with pay-per-view fights and also why certain fights have to be on pay-per-view, including the Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford fight, which, by the way, really does co-sign what Bob Arum had to say about piracy and the effect that piracy could be having on the negotiations to get that fight made. Now, before I get into that, though, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you're new to the channel, thank you so much for watching the channel. Please accept my invitation to hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. And if you are a longtime subscriber and supporter to the channel, thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for your continued support. It really does mean a lot. Make sure you hit that like and that you hit that like button and share button if you wouldn't mind before you leave the video. So let's get into this. Stephen ESPINOZA gave an interview over on Tay Jones' channel, and I thought it was very, very enlightening because it clarified a lot of questions that were out about some recent comments Stephen ESPINOZA made about the Errol Spence Jr. fight. Now, before I do that, Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford potential fight. Now, first things first, he did not, I'm going to be very clear, speak directly about the fight, about any of the negotiations taking place in the fight, because he said, look, my opinion is there's nothing that I can say or he can say, Stephen ESPINOZA, in public that would help that fight get made. Anything that he would say or any information that he would give out, it would not serve to improve the likelihood that they're able to make the fight, right? So which tells you one thing, and I do believe Stephen ESPINOZA is being a straight shooter, as straight as he can be, that they want the fight and that fight is still in negotiations. But he said very specifically what rumors he thought were full of it, right? And they were two. One, he said, was any issue around us not offering enough money to Terence Crawford, right? So the idea that, and I have to assume he's talking about the notion that they made, Showtime made an offer of less than $5 million to Terence Crawford for that fight. But then he also said, any rumors around difficulties between the PBC, Terence Crawford, the PBC, Showtime, and the PBC were not true. Specifically, talked about any issue that he could have had or could be having with Al Heyman. And as he said, look, if I had any, I've been working with Al Heyman for a very long time. If I had any issues with Al Heyman, I would talk to Al Heyman directly about that. Those are what he said was comical and did not believe were rooted in anything related to where they are in that negotiation. Now, also what he did. Now, however, and I've said this in every video that I've done, whenever I hear anybody say anything about the fight, I always try to compare it to things that have been said by parties that are close to the fight. For example, Stephen ESPINOZA has said that one of the major issues to the fight was people thinking that the fight may be bigger than the fight really is. Is it a Floyd Mayweather Jr., Manny Pacquiao size fight? No, it is not. So we're not going to be able to pay that type of money, right? So the idea that Terence Crawford may not be happy with the money he's offering could come from is a reasonable reading of what Stephen Espinoza has said and what Burning the Boxer has said on his channel around why can't Errol get 50, Bud can't get 50, why can't Bud get 50-50, right? Or they pay Bud what they want. So I think that it's still safe to assume based on what they say that money could be an issue. Now, one of the other things that have been said about the fight, but not through anybody directly associated with it, which is Bob Arum. Now, Bob Arum said, look, the reason he didn't think that the fight between Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford could be made is because of pay-per-view piracy, right? And what pay-per-view piracy is that people steal the fights. Now, a fact was given, not directly addressing, be very clear about this, Stephen Espinoza was not specifically addressing the Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford fight, but talking about the pay-per-view model in general. Says that, look, the more boxing matches become aired digitally, I guess that's maybe an oxymoron, but are made available to boxing fans in a digital format, the easier it is to pirate the fights. And what he said was that, look, that really does affect the fight and the likelihood of being able to make fights, because people think that that's a victimless crime, but it's really not. He said about sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less than 90% of the pay-per-view, of the money paid in pay-per-view, go to the fighters. He says, so if we charge $70 for a pay-per-view, of that 60% of that, 60% of that, or $60 of that goes to the fighter. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. So whenever you buy a pay-per-view, you don't buy a pay-per-view. You are literally, if you say you have a Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford have a pay-per-view, right? And they say they do a 60-40 split, or make it just be 50-50, make it real even, right? Then for a $70 pay-per-view, or just say they say it for $100 pay-per-view, right? You get 90% of that, $90 of that goes to Errol and Terence. That would mean $45 per deal goes to Terence and $45 goes to Errol. If 1 million people, if 100,000 people steal that, right? That's $4.5 million that comes out of the pocket of Errol Spence Jr. and comes out of the pocket of Terence Crawford, right? So, and especially since you now have the same demographic of people, because they appeal to Errol and Terence, both agree, are probably have the same pool of pay-per-view buyers available to them. That's a lot of money when people steal pay-per-views, right? So as far as like the amount of the back end that could be paid, that really does affect it, right? So that's kind of co-signing what Bob Arum said. Now, another thing that Stephen Espinoza said about the pay-per-view model was like, some of these fights have to be made. They have to be pay-per-view. That's how we can actually afford to pay the fighters. We don't have enough budget now this is me filling in the gap here, because he's saying, look, in order for some of these fights to get made and the fighters to get what they deserve, that's why it's on pay-per-view, because the big networks and those guys are not putting a ton of money out there to pay these guys these really, really big salaries. At least Showtime is, right? So to make these really big fights, they have to be on pay-per-view, and that piracy really does affect it. So if Terence Crawford fighters is, he has a big name and a lot of people say they're fans of him, but how many people are actually buying this fight, and how much risk really is the Showtime going to take in that regard? Probably not a lot. But anyway, make sure you go check out that interview. I thought it was very, very enlightening, interesting stuff. They're still working on the fight, but if I'm looking at it and just kind of judging what he's saying, it seems like they still may be a ways off, a little bit of a ways off of it, but that's just what I'm reading out of what he had to say. Anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.